So we'll start with a review because that always helps us keep everything in context of how the conversation is going. I want to go all the way back to the beginning of the conversation between Vidura and Maitreya when they first met a few chapters ago. Vidura asked, "O great sage, everyone in this world engages in fruitive activities to attain happiness, but one finds neither satiation nor mitigation of distress. On the contrary, one is only aggravated by such activities. Please, therefore, give us directions on how one should live for real happiness." And the basic idea that Maitreya is presenting is to describe how this world is not an eternal abode or a place of habitation for the spirit souls. So whenever a spirit soul tries to enjoy in a temporary, miserable, death-oriented environment, there's bound to be frustration, difficulties, aggravation. So he's going right back to the root of how the Lord creates this illusory environment. And by understanding the details, it helps us more clearly understand how the illusion is presented. I was thinking this morning, just like the Bible describes, that the world was created in 7 days. So they understand there's a creator, but there's no real details of how that manifestation has come about. So there's naturally, in an inquisitive mind, which is the human mind, questions. Did he really do it? How did he do it? There's no information which really satisfies that information. But in the Vedic literatures, and here especially Maitreya, will very much clarify how that happens. So in his description, he described how the Lord exists in a spiritual world beyond, all by himself, with his eternal associates prior to any material manifestation, then glances over the Mahatattva or the Pradhan and infuses the living entities into this material world. And we read about how the different elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego were manifested in the Mahatattva. But then there was not harmonious dealings between the controlling demigods of those elements or amongst the elements themselves. So the demigods prayed to the Supreme Lord for his help and for his guidance, how to carry out their activities as controllers of those elements. So now Maitreya will continue with chapter 6, and I'll switch over to the texts. This is Srimad-Bhagavatam, January 2022, lessons 7 and 8, which begin with chapter 6, creation of the universal form. Text 1. The Rishi Maitreya continued. The Lord thus heard about the suspension of the progressive creative functions of the universe due to the non-combination of his potencies, such as the Mahatattva. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. There is nothing wanting in the creation of the Lord. All the potencies are there in a dormant state. But unless they are combined by the will of the Lord, nothing can progress. The suspended progressive work of creation can only be revived by the direction of the Lord. Samapriya?
Okay, let's start today. First of all, I want to say Hare Krishna and good morning to everyone. There's a lot of slides that we have prepared today. So generally, I'll ask people to read at least two. And and we'll see that there aren't that many lengthy purports. So we will hold our discussions until, because there are so many slides, we'll just hold the discussions off a little bit more, unless there's some point that, and if there is a point that really is questionable, so just write it down and then I'll ask for questions as we go along.
I think as I looked through it, Sama, that the first lesson, 1 through 11, those purports are informative, that we might have discussions on those. But after that, from 11 to 34, where there's descriptions of the actual universal form, that's where what you were just talking about will take place more.
Okay. All right. So Manvantar, would you like to begin?
Sure. Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 6, Text 2. The Supreme Powerful Lord then simultaneously entered into the 23 elements with the goddess Kali, his external energy, who alone amalgamates all the different elements. Purport. The ingredients of matter are counted as 23. The total material energy, Baal's ego, sound, touch, form, taste, smell, earth, water, fire, air, sky, eye, ear, nose, tongue, skin, hand, leg, evacuating organ, genitals, speech, and mind. All are combined together by the influence of time and are again dissolved in the course of time. Time, therefore, is the energy of the Lord and acts in her own way by the direction of the Lord. This energy is called Kali and is represented by the dark, destructive goddess, generally worshipped by person influenced by the mode of darkness or ignorance in material existence. The energy, which acts as material nature in a combination of 23 ingredients, is not the final source of creation. The Lord enters into the elements and applies his energy, called Kali.
Okay. I'm going to have you read the next slide, but I just wanted to mention how time is considered her, to be her, feminine, the goddess Kali. So that to me was a very interesting point, how due to time, everything gets destroyed through the influence of the goddess Kali. And so this, instead of father time, it's kind of like mother time. I thought that was kind of interesting. Manvatar, why don't you continue reading unless you have something to say about that slide?
Text 3. Thus, when the personality of Godhead entered into the elements by his energy, all the living entities were enlivened into different activities, just as one is engaged in his work after awakening from sleep. Purport. Every individual soul remains unconscious after the dissolution of the creation, and thus enters into the Lord with his material energy. These individual living entities are conditioned souls everlastingly, but in each and every material creation, they are given a chance to liberate themselves and become free souls. They are all given a chance to take advantage of the Vedic wisdom and find out what is their relationship with the Supreme Lord, how they can be liberated, and what the ultimate profit is in such liberation. By properly studying the Vedas, one becomes conscious of his position and thus takes the transcendental devotional service of the Lord and is gradually promoted to the spiritual sky. The individual souls in the material world engage in different activities according to their past unfinished desires. After the dissolution of a particular body, the individual soul forgets everything, but the all-merciful Lord, who is situated in everyone's heart as the witness, the supersoul, awakens him and reminds him of his past desires, and thus he begins to act accordingly in his next life. This unseen guidance is described as fate, and a sensible man can understand that this continues his material bondage in the three modes of nature.
Do you have a comment on that? On Vantara?
Not really. I mean, it's pretty profound how everything is coming together, even though we studied aspects of it previously, is still expounded upon more and more. Is very encouraging to hear.
Yeah, and the modes of material nature are the binding force. And it's amazing. We have a desire. It's so subtle. It's so subtle that we become a prisoner in this material world due to our desires here. Nanda, can you add something to that? I thought this was a very profound last sentence. Nandaji?
Yeah, sorry. Well, I just think it's so interesting because of how, not the very last sentence, but a couple of sentences back, it was saying how we have those desires and we go to, when we leave our body, and even if we get absorbed in the body of Mahavishnu, then when it's time for the creation again, I think that'll be explained in other verses, we come out and Krishna reminds us of those previous desires. And that's how come we're entangled life after life, because the desires are there. It's like amazing. Not just one or two lifetimes, but millions of lifetimes.
It's amazing. And that word amazing, amaze, it's a maze. That's what it is. It's a maze.
Good point.
Okay, well, why don't we continue now with Nanda, you want to read?
Yes, ma'am. 364. When the 23 principal elements are set in action by the will of the Supreme, the gigantic universal form or Vishvarup body of the Lord came into existence. Purport: the Virat Rupa or Vishvarupa, the gigantic universal form of the Lord, which is very much appreciated by the impersonalist, is not an eternal form of the Lord. It is manifested by the supreme will of the Lord after the ingredients of material creation. The Lord exhibited his Virat or Vishvarupa to Arjuna just to convince the impersonalist that he is the original personality of Godhead. Krishna exhibited the Virat Rupa. It is not that Krishna was exhibited by the Virat Rupa. The Virat Rupa is not therefore an eternal form of the Lord exhibited in the spiritual sky. It is a material manifestation of the Lord. The Archa Vigraha, or worshipable deity in the temple, is a similar manifestation of the Lord for the neophytes. But in spite of their material touch, such forms of the Lord as the Virat and Archana are all non-different from his eternal form as Lord Krishna.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
How is that? Okay, now you have to explain that one. How the material, how the Archa Vigraha and the Virat Rupa are on the, are the same level.
I have to admit, when I read the forum to this lesson and Dhruva Maharaj Prabhu was saying, a condensed version of that, that the Archa and the Virat Rupa were similar in the sense that they're not eternal forms. I couldn't accept it right off the bat because I'm thinking, no, wait a minute. The Archa Vigraha isn't a temporary form. And I was thinking I was going to start to write him and ask him. And instead, Krishna gave me the good intelligence to read the verses first. And there it is right there in black and white. Yeah. And it's just, I have to admit, I hadn't considered it anyway, that's one thing that's repeatedly surprised me about this section. The details of things that I know I've read before are now coming again to my eyes and my mind again. And it's like, oh, I just, the nuances and subtleties of it is just like ever expanding and amazing. So that's all I can say.
That's wonderful. It's very deep. It's deeper. And when people say that Prabhupada didn't tell us everything, really? This is like so deep.
Yeah.
You can still go deep after doing this for 50 years. You can go deeper and deeper.
Exactly.
I was going to have people read 2 verses. Why don't you read the next one, Nandaji, and then we'll go on.
Okay. 6th chapter, verse number 5. As the Lord in his plenary portion entered into the elements of the universal creation, they transformed into the gigantic form in which all the planetary systems and all movable and immovable creations rest. Purport: the elements of cosmic creation are all matter and have no potency to increase in volume unless entered into by the Lord in his plenary portion. This means that matter does not increase or decrease unless it is spiritually touched. Matter is a product of spirit and increases only by the touch of spirit. The entire cosmic manifestation has not assumed its gigantic form by itself, as wrongly calculated by less intelligent persons. As long as spirit is within matter, matter can increase as needed, but without the spirit, matter stops increasing. For example, as long as there is spiritual consciousness within the material body of a living entity, the body increases to the required size. But a dead material body, which has no spiritual consciousness, stops increasing. In Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, importance is given to the spiritual consciousness, not the body. The entire cosmic body increased by the same process that we experience in our small bodies. One should not, however, foolishly think that the individual infinitesimal soul is the cause of the gigantic manifestation of the universal form. The universal form is called the Virat Rupa because the Supreme Lord is within it in his plenary portion.
Wow. Okay, that's pretty profound. Can you add to that, Nandaji?
Well, that example that Prabhupada gives about how a dead body doesn't increase, that's just so clear, basic. It's just so basic. It's just like one of those basic things that Srila Prabhupada tells us that as soon as he tells us, we say, oh yeah, that makes so much sense. But previous to that, we never thought of it. So when he says the difference between a live body and a dead body is the presence of the spirit soul, it's, oh yeah, that's so clear. So here, even this conception of the Virat Purusha manifesting, because why? Because the Supreme Lord enters into all those material ingredients, and therefore it has a spirit, and therefore it can increase in size. And you can just say, oh yeah, that makes so much sense, even though on our own we would never have come to that conclusion.
So also these qualities that are being described in the Virat Rupa. So, and what about the Archa Vigraha? That Archa Vigraha has a lot of qualities too.
Yeah, all of it. Yeah.
Yeah, all of them, because they're compared.
Yeah, and he said, Krishna will talk to you if you, serve him nicely. One day he'll talk to you. He's probably already talking to you, Sama, for all your service.
Yeah, well, I got to get a hearing aid. Hare Krishna.
What hearing aid? You're reading the hearing aid. This is our hearing aid.
This is our hearing aid, right? Prabhupada's our hearing aid. All right, thank you, Nandaji. Let's go on with Amy. Would you like to read, Amy?
She left.
Hi, I'm not getting this.
Oh, yeah.
Hare Krishna, I'm not receiving the screen sharing and I'm not functioning well with the video. Maybe not, but thank you.
Oh, okay. Seems to be some technical difficulty. All right. So, and Vaishnav is not. Anita, would you like to read, Anita?
Yeah, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Anita.
Srimad-Bhagavatam 3.6.6. The gigantic Virat Purusha, known as Hiranamaya, lived for 1,000 celestial years on the water of the universe, and all the living entities lay with him. Purport. After the Lord entered each and every universe as the Garbhodakshay Vishnu, half of the universe was filled with the water. The cosmic manifestation of the planetary systems, outer space, etc., which are visible to us, is only one half of the complete universe. Before the manifestation takes place and after the entrance of Vishnu within the universe, there is a period of 1,000 celestial years. All the living entities injected within the womb of the Mahatat are divided in all universes with the incarnation of Garbhodesha Vishnu, and all of them lie down with the Lord until Brahma is born. Brahma is the first living being within the universe, and from him all other demigods and living creatures are born. Manu is the original father of mankind, and therefore in Sanskrit mankind is called Manushya. Humanity is in different bodily qualities, is distributed throughout the various planetary systems.
Okay, thank you. And let's go on with Tisha.
Actually, I want to make a point here.
Oh,
What's happening now is that the narration is gradually evolving, just as a spirit soul inside a womb takes time to gradually evolve to its form. Similarly, what's happened now is that Mahavishnu has expanded himself into the Garbhodaksha Vishnu within each universe. Now imagine this, or understand this clarity and preciseness. Each soul that was in Mahavishnu is now being put into the body of a Garbhodaksha Vishnu within a particular universe to carry out its activities due to its past activities in the previous creation. So within Garbhodaksha Vishnu's body, it was described in that purport, all the living entities are situated for 1,000 celestial years. During that time, the entire universe is becoming a suitable environment for life, just as when the little body becomes a pea, and then between the egg and the sperm of the male and female, and then it gradually evolves, or like a flower or a plant, when it's put in the ground, it starts to germinate. And for some time, that plant isn't even seen above ground. It takes time for it to germinate and work its way up through the earth until it finally penetrates and comes out. It's a similar principles and functions that are going on. Just wanted to note that we're changing narrative to inside each universe. At this particular point, it will go back outside again, I believe.
I see. Do you understand that, Anita? Is that can you?
Yes, I think what he explained, and he said that first, we had as we know, Karnadakshayi Vishnu was the origin, and then from there the Garbhodaya Vishnu appears, and so from there is the starting the creation, that's what my understanding, and then all the demigods and the creatures, everything is.
Yeah,
formed.
this is due to the presence of the Lord. Just like when I don't know if Prabhupada gave the example yet, and we might go on with the example in a minute, of the child in the womb, how without the child being in the womb, it would not grow. In the same way, the body would not grow without the spirit soul being present. In the same way, nothing would grow without Krishna entering in the universe. This is wonderful, wonderful examples that Prabhupada.
Chaita Mai rose her hand.
Chaita, did you want something?
Yes, thank you so much. I'm wondering about the idea of the living entities. They're all inside of Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. Is it that these living entities are the ones who have desires, and those who don't have desires, they're in Goloka Vrindavan?
Exactly. Material
No, that's
desire.
not true.
No?
No, every living entity has desires. It's a
Oh, that's
natural
right. I
function
just said
of-
material desires.
Right. Every living
Okay.
entity has desires. But what's happened is that these particular souls, as described, I think everybody knows, conditioned souls are those who are misusing the infinitesimal free will. They're not desiring to serve the Lord, they're desiring to be enjoyers. So in order to fulfill that desire and simultaneously transform it to the proper pure desire as their constitutional position is, the Lord creates this material world. And those that have that inherent glitch, improper desire, enter into this material atmosphere.
I see.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Okay, so Tisha, you're going to read?
Yes, thank you, Mataji. Srimad-Bhagavatam 3:6-7. The total energy of the Mahatattva in the form of the gigantic Virat Rupa divided himself by himself into the consciousness of the living entities, the life of activity and self-identification, which are subdivided into 1, 10, and 3 respectively. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The total consciousness is that of the gigantic Virat Rupa, and the same consciousness is exhibited in individual persons. The activity of consciousness is performed through the air of life, which is of 10 divisions. The airs of life are called prana, apana, udana, vyana, and samana, and are also differently qualified as naga, kurma, kirkara, devadatta, and dhananjaya. The consciousness of the soul becomes polluted by the material atmosphere, and thus various activities are exhibited in the false ego of bodily identification. The monist believes that there is only one consciousness, whereas the sattvatas or the devotees believe that although there is undoubtedly one consciousness, they are one because there is agreement. The individual consciousness is advised to dovetail with the supreme consciousness as instructed by the Lord in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, verse 66. Sarva dharman parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja. The individual consciousness, Arjuna, is advised to dovetail with the supreme consciousness and thus maintain his conscious purity. It is foolish to try to stop the activities of consciousness, but they can be purified when they are dovetailed with the Supreme. This consciousness is divided into 3 modes of self-identification according to the proportion of purity. Adhyatmika, or self-identification with the body and mind. Adi Bhautika, or self-identification with the material products. And Adi Dvaika, or self-identification as a servant of the Lord. Of the 3, Adi Dvaika, self-identification is the beginning of purity of consciousness in pursuance of the desire of the Lord.
Okay, thank you, Tisha. Does anyone have any, Betsy, you have something to add to this?
I wanted to hear Tisha's commentary, and
Oh,
then
Tisha,
if there
you're
are any
on.
questions.
Thank you, Prabhu. I mean, I read this particular one. Thank you for calling him on me for reading it. Was so much for me like an explanation of the difference between personalists and impersonalists, that we are our individual selves now and forever. And the idea is to dovetail, like I just kind of imagined like when you're driving in a car, you get next to the car, and if you are swerving and turning together, you've dovetailed into the same movement of the Supreme. And so that, for me, it was, it's so much, it's a lot to understand, but I guess what I got out of it is I'm always my individual soul, and the idea is to dovetail my desires and everything to serve Krishna. And that way I will be one with Krishna while I still maintain my individuality.
Wonderful. Very good. Thank you. That was good, right? Very nice, Tisha. Okay. Let's go on with Chaitamayi. Would you like to read next?
I just had a question about the last paragraph, if I may.
Wait
Oh,
a second.
what-
But
I
did
I
you?
just wanted to say, Chaitanya, you did an excellent job with that previous verse, how the Lord entered into this one, into 1, 10, and 3 respectively. You broke that down very nicely in your forum. Sorry. to
Hare
interrupt.
Krishna. Hare Krishna. I was a little confused when I read the three modes, Adhyatmika, Adhibodhika, and Adhidevika. I was remembering how I was taught that the three of those refer to the three kinds of suffering. So how do these two relate to each other?
Is Sesha with us, Sama? Is he going to speak?
No, he's
Okay.
not feeling so great.
Okay.
But yeah, this is a very, there's Nanda. Let's Nanda answer this in a second.
Not necessarily. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sal.
No, I was just going to say also, when I read these 3 qualities, I was questioning how is this being used, but it's a deeper understanding of the whole thing. It's really fantastic, but we have to pay attention to it. Nanda, can you shed some light on this, please?
No, that's exactly the same point that I was going to make, because here it's mentioned Adi Atmika, Adi Bodhika, and Adi Daivika in one way. And then in a couple more verses, because I don't have my book in front of me, but it mentions it in another way. And
Right.
exactly, I think it's 2 or 3 different ways. I started to take notes on the different ways that he described or defined Adi Atmika, Adi Bodhika, different than what, quote unquote, just like Chaitanya said, like what we were, quote unquote, taught back as the sufferings. And it's just like you said, a deeper understanding. And even the other thing that, even this thing about the prana, the 10 airs, in a couple more verses, he's going to give a little more description and go a little deeper on what those 10 airs are. It's very interesting. That's all I have to say. Hare Krishna.
Oh, that's good. It's interesting also. Sorry.
I can clear up a little bit about Adhyatmika, Adhibodhika, and Adhidaivika.
Good. Please clear it up.
Atma is self-identification with the body and mind. It's like the Atma is the body and the mind. Bodhika is with material products. It's an outer, a bodhika is like bahiranga. It's an outside reality, an outside object. So one identifies himself as some with other things. We'll read it in the like the device, the phone. I'm my car. You're not the car, but people identify with it. And Adidaivaka, Daiva means superior energy, like Daivi Heshu Gunamai. So Adidaivaka means that which is forced upon the living entity. Self-identification, yeah. If we understand the basic roots of the words, then it's easier to understand how they're applied in different circumstances. Atma, Bodhika, and Daivi.
That's great.
I just want
Thank
to
you,
add
Prabhu.
one more thing. Prabhupada did instruct us in the beginning that if you don't understand something, keep reading. And it's a fact. He's explaining everything. We just have to really learn to read. That's what we're trying to do here, is actually practice reading with depth. Srila Prabhupada's books. All of the answers are there. We just have to read with consciousness. Thank you. Chaitanya, why don't you read with consciousness? Unmute.
Sorry. Srimad-Bhagavatam 3:6-8. The gigantic universal form of the Supreme Lord is the first incarnation and plenary portion of the super soul. Wow. He is the self of an unlimited number of living entities, and in him rests the aggregate creation, which thus flourishes. Purport. The Supreme Lord expands himself in 2 ways: by personal plenary expansions and separated minute expansions. The personal plenary expansions are Vishnu Tattvas, and the separated expansions are the living entities. Since the living entities are very small, they are sometimes described as the marginal energy of the Lord. But the mystic yogis consider the living entities and the super soul, Paramatma, to be one and the same. It is, however, a minor point of controversy. After all, everything created rests on the gigantic Virat, or universal form of the Lord.
Can we go on?
So
Why
I
don't
was
you go
thinking
on?
of the concept of Achinta Beta Beta. We are the same as him, but we are different. And somehow these are reconciled. It's being done here. It's being displayed in a very physical way. We're parts of him, but we're also included within his body until he dictates otherwise.
Yeah, very minute, very minute. Prabhupada over and over again talks about the same thing, how the jiva is not the Lord. We are part and parcel of the Lord. It's a very important point to understand. Why don't you go on and read the next one, Chaita?
Haribol. Srimad-Bhagavatam 3:6-9. The gigantic universal form is represented by 3, 10, and 1, in the sense that he is the body and the mind and the senses. He is the dynamic force for all movements by 10 kinds of life energy. And he is the one heart where life energy is generated. Purport. The movements of the body are first generated from the heart, and all the activities of the body are made possible by the senses, powered by the 10 kinds of air within the body. The 10 kinds of air are described as follows. The main air passing through the nose and breathing is called prana. The air which passes through the rectum as evacuated bodily air is called apana. The air which adjusts the foodstuff within the stomach and which sometimes sounds as belching is called samana. The air which passes through the throat and the stoppage of which constitutes suffocation is called the udan. And the total air which circulates throughout the entire body is called the vyana air. Subtler than these 5 airs, there are others also. That which facilitates the opening of the eyes, mouth, etc., is called naga air. The air which increases appetite is called krikara air. The air which helps contraction is called kurma air. The air which helps relaxation by opening the mouth wide and yawning is called devadatta air. And the air which helps sustenance is called dhananjaya air. All these airs are generated from the center of the heart, which is one only. This central energy is superior energy of the Lord, who is seated within the heart with the soul of the body, who acts under the guidance of the Lord.
So you have something to say about that?
What an amazing breakdown of how we are composed and how we move. And it's something that we don't really consider very much. We take it for granted. But if one is ever in a situation where you're having an asthma attack or you're underwater and you can't get to the surface, that really comes to the forefront at that point. But it's wonderful that it all comes from the one heart. I love that phrase. He is the one heart where life energy is generated.
Right.
And then if we can assimilate that, then we'll go to him for support more often. It's so easy to just say, well, I'm so healthy, I'm so strong, I could do everything myself. But we need to bear in mind on a daily, even a moment by moment basis, that all of this is coming from Krishna.
And that makes us totally dependent on him. Totally dependent. Right? That's also a nice meditation to see our complete dependence on Krishna.
Thank you, Mata.
Thank you. Gopa, would you like to read for us next? Gopa Patniji.
All righty. Srimad-Bhagavatam 3:6-10. The Supreme Lord is the super soul of all the demigods, entrusted with the task of constructing the cosmic manifestation. Being thus prayed to by the demigods, he thought to himself and thus manifested the gigantic form for their understanding. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The individual human body does not develop from the womb of the mother independently, but because the living entity, the soul, is within the body. Without the living entity, a material body cannot automatically take shape or develop. When any material object displays development, it must be understood that there is a spiritual soul within the manifestation. The gigantic universe has developed gradually, just as the body of a child develops. The conception that the transcendence enters within the universe is therefore logical. As the materialist cannot find the soul and the super soul within the heart, similarly, for want or sufficient knowledge, they cannot see that the supreme soul is the cause of the universe. The Lord is therefore described in the Vedic language as Avan Manasa Gochara, beyond the conception of words and mind. The Lord is called Adhoksaja, or the person who is beyond perception by the blunt, limited potency of our senses. The Lord can reveal himself only to a person who is submissive and who engages in his transcendental loving service. The demigods controlling the elements and the ingredients of universal affairs prayed to the Lord for guidance. And thus, he manifested his gigantic form as he did at the request of Arjuna.
Right. So that we see how this verse actually in purport refer to the first verse that we studied. You want to put up the first verse that we on this review today? It has a lot to do with it. It's the answer of the questions. We see that the demigods were praying because nothing was in here. Read this, Gopa, read this.
The Rishi Maitreya continued. The Lord thus heard about the suspension of the progressive creative functions of the universe due to the non-combination of his potencies, such as the Mahatattva.
So the demigods were confused as what to do. So then they approached him and prayed to his to be in knowledge of how they can serve him. And I thought that was a nice analogy between the two of them. Also, the example of the mother and the child in the womb, that's what I referred to before, how we see that if the soul is within the womb, the body of the child develops. In the same way, if the Lord is within the universe, he is the soul, he is the soul, the super soul within the universe, then everything becomes manifest. I thought that was a really nice example. Anyone have anything else to add to this? Gopa? Gopa G. Gopa. Okay.
No, I'm good.
She's good.
I'm good.
Gopa, she's very good. Okay, let's go on with Elizabeth. Elizabeth, please read. Okay.
Maitreya said, "You may now hear from me how the Supreme Lord separated himself into the diverse forms of the demigods after the manifestation of the gigantic universal form." Purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The demigods are separated parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, as are all other living entities. The only difference between the demigods and the ordinary living entities is that when the living entities are rich in pious acts of devotional service to the Lord, and when their desire to lord it over material energy has vanished, they are promoted to the post of demigods, who are entrusted by the Lord with executing the management of the universal affairs.
Okay, go on reading. No, Patti, go back one. Yeah, go on reading.
Agni or heat separated from his mouth, and all the directors of material affairs enter into it in their respective positions. By that energy, the living entity expresses himself in words. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The mouth of the gigantic universal form of the Lord is the source of the speaking power. The director of the fire element is the controlling deity of the Adi Daiva. The speeches delivered are Adhyatma, or bodily functions, and are the subject matter of the speeches is material productions of the Adibhuta principle.
Or yeah. Patsy, would you like to, before we go on with these verses, explain actually how this is all relevant to how Krishna is entering into everything?
Sure. What Maitreya did was, through verses 1 through 10, was describe the gigantic universal body, universal form of the Lord, and its basic function. And starting here, he changes direction. He says, "You may now hear from me how the Supreme Lord separated himself into the diverse forms of the demigods after the manifestation of the gigantic universal form." So now he's going, it's kind of like dissecting something. You go deeper and deeper into how it was constructed. He's now changing over to how that Supreme Lord, previously we read that he expanded himself. What number am I on here? 19. He lived for 100,000 years. Then it says here, he divided himself by himself into the consciousness of the living entities, the life activity and self-identification, which are subdivided into 1, 10, and 3 respectively. That was the first expansion. And now he's going further into separating and giving the potency for each posts. Agni is a post, Brahma is a post, Varuna is a post, the sun god is a post. They're filled by different living entities who have the qualification of being pious enough to carry on that particular service. So here we're seeing how the Lord is expanding and how the power of the demigods infused along with the elements which have been created, that combination gives the individual living entities, when they get a body, the power to perform these various activities which are being described, such as the mouth being able to speak.
So you would say that the Lord is actually expanding himself and functioning through the demigods who are in charge of these different, who are in charge. So this is very important, because we see how the order of the universe is coming from Krishna, but there are designated services that other demigods perform, being empowered by the Lord to produce the universe.
Very
okay.
Good. And that also explains why it's ignorant people who think that the demigods are the supreme God. They're not. They're empowered personalities or posts. One little thing I want to bring up here again. We just discussed it, but this shows a perfect example of that Adidaiva, Adhyatma, and Adibhotika principle. The director of the element is the controlling deity, Daivi. The speech delivered is by the person or the Atma, Adhyatmika, bodily function, and the subject matter about which the speeches are talking about is the Adibhotika principle.
Very good. Elizabeth, did you want to say something about the verses that you just read? Do you understand how this very important point, how the Lord is entering and controlling everything that's going on in the universe through the demigods?
Mm-hmm. I'm good, Mataji. Thank you.
Okay. Let's go on now with Faye.
Srimad-Bhagavatam 3.6, 13 through 16. When the palette of the gigantic form was separately manifested, Varuna, the director of water in the planetary systems, entered therein, and thus the living entity has the facility to taste everything with his tongue. When the Lord's two nostrils separately manifested themselves, the dual Asvini Kumaras entered them in their proper positions, and because of this, the living entities can smell the aromas of everything. Thereafter, the two eyes of the gigantic form of the Lord were separately manifested. The sun, director of light, entered them with the partial representation of eyesight, and thus the living entities can have vision of forms. When there was a manifestation of skin separated from the gigantic form, Anila, the deity directing the wind, entered with partial touch, and thus the living entities can realize tactile knowledge.
Before we go on, I just have one question to ask. What does it mean partial? What does it mean partial? Partial, he entered in with partial touch, with partial eyesight.
Only the Lord has everything in full opulences. He is fully transcendental in all of his senses. We who exist in the material manifestation don't have such transcendental sensory capacities. We're limited. Therefore, limited in this case would imply partial. We have partial vision, not full vision.
Well, what about in the spiritual world? Are these souls?
In the spiritual world, we're not conditioned. In the spiritual world, our senses are not filtered through the realm of conditioned contamination. Therefore, in the spiritual world, our propensities are more like the Lord. And
Are they still partial in the spiritual world?
Partial in the sense of ultimate power, definitely.
Good. Okay.
That's go back into Beta Beta with we are parts of the Supreme Lord. We are quantitatively very infinitesimally smaller, but we're qualitatively much like him.
Very good. Thank you. That was very well put. Continue reading.
Yes, Mataji. Srimad-Bhagavatam 3.6.17. When the ears of the gigantic form became manifested, all the controlling deities of the directions entered into them with the hearing principles, and by which all the living entities hear and take advantage of sound. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The ear is the most important instrument in the body of the living entity. Sound is the most important medium for carrying the message of distant and unknown things. The perfection of all sound or knowledge enters through the ear and makes one's life perfect. The entire Vedic system of knowledge is received by oral perception only, and thus sound is the most important source of knowledge.
Okay, now I can't resist one. You got to tell me something about this divine purport.
I think it's going back nicely to many of the verses we've studied earlier this month and also in other sections of not only Srimad-Bhagavatam and the Gita. How did Krishna first impart knowledge to Rama? How did Lord Krishna Chaitanya deliver the Maha Mantra sound? Sound is on that continuum of senses is the finest, the ethers, and then on down to where you get ultimately to earth, which was representative of taste. It's from subtle gradations down to denser and denser gradations. Sound is that most perfect form of conveying everything to us. And that sound comes transcendentally through our ears to our hearts. That's
Very
where the
good.
message goes.
Very nice, Faye.
Thank you, my
Faye has been hearing transcendental sound deeply for quite a while. Thank you, Faye.
At your feet, Mataji.
Hare Krishna. No, don't go at my fungus feet. All right. How about Ian? Would you like to read, Ian? I saw that you were here. He's coming. Ian? Okay, Ian is not responding. Vaishnavi. Vaishnavi, could you read, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
My Prabhu is going to put it on the screen.
It's on the screen.
I am not.
Oh, Pati, did you put it on the screen? I see it.
1 minute.
Okay. There's Ian.
Srimad-Bhagavatam 3.6:19 through 24. When the genitals of the gigantic form separately became manifest, then Prajapati, the original living creature, entered into them with his partial semen, and thus the living entities can enjoy sex pleasure. The evacuating channel separately became manifest, and the director named Mitra entered into it with partial organs of evacuation. Thus, the living entities are able to pass stool and urine. Thereafter, when the hands of gigantic form separately became manifested, Indra, the ruler of the heavenly planets, entered into them, and thus the living entity is able to transact business for his livelihood. Thereafter, the legs of the gigantic form separately became manifest, and the demigod named Vishnu, not the personality of Godhead, entered with partial movement. This helps the living entity move to his destination. When the intelligence of gigantic form separately became manifest, Brahma, the Lord of the Vedas, entered into it with the partial power of understanding. And thus, an object of understanding is experienced by the living entities. After that, the heart of the gigantic form separately manifested itself, and into it entered the moon demigod with partial mental activity. Thus, the living entity can conduct his mental speculations.
Go on reading.
No, I have a question in the previous one. Should I continue to read or?
No, you can ask your question.
So when this says we have ability to understand only partially, the last paragraph where moon demigod entered with partial mental activity, thus the living entity can conduct his mental speculation. So we can only understand partially. And then the previous one, Brahma, the Lord of the Vedas, entered into it with the partial power of understanding. So from these, what I understand is that we can only understand partially, not completely.
To the extent that we are Krishna conscious, we can understand. That's true. And we have to, this is a very important point about partial. We're not capable of understanding everything, but if we're completely pure, lined up with the will of the Lord, we can understand to our capacity. Right?
Okay.
Does someone have, Patti, can you add to that?
I liked what Faye said. Faye presented it perfectly. that the living entity being minute, and it's interesting that Srila Prabhupada, and everybody's pointing it out, he uses this word partially in practically every verse, because first of all, we have the Mahavishnu, who has expanded himself into Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, and there are millions and billions of other universes. So no one in any one universe will have complete knowledge, complete anything. It's all partial, because there are so many in other universes in the causal ocean. So it's only partial because it's on one side, it's in one universe. So it's only partially manifested. It's not the entire ability to see everything, even outside the universe, is within one universe.
Right. That's a good example of it also. But even if it was beyond everything, we are partial. We are infinitesimal living entities. Right. We don't have the innately. That means our nature is that we are not. We're not infinite. We're eternal. We're eternal, but we're not infinite. We go on.
As we're discussing this, he gave of course, each individual living entity only has partial ability, but he's saying in the verses themselves that he entered into it partially. He gave partial ability to do this or partial ability to do that, because it's unlimited, and in each universe there's only partial ability for any of those activities that we're reading about.
Right. It's not the universe. It's finite. It's finite.
Right.
So good. Okay. Does that answer your question, Vaishnavi?
Yes.
Okay. Ian, would you like to read the next one? Oh, wait. Vaishnavi, you were going to read this, and then Ian, if you can. He had some technical difficulty, but if you can, read the next one after this.
Srimad-Bhagavatam 3.6.25. Thereafter, the materialistic ego of the gigantic form separately manifested itself, and into it entered Rudra, the controller of the false ego, with his own partial activities, by which the living entity transacts his objective actions. Purport. The false ego of materialistic identity is controlled by the demigod Rudra, an incarnation of Lord Shiva. Rudra is the incarnation of the Supreme Lord, who controls the mode of ignorance within material nature. The activities of the false ego are based on the objective of the body and mind. Most persons conducted by the false ego are controlled by Lord Shiva. When one reaches the finer version of ignorance, he falsely thinks of himself as the Supreme Lord. That egoistic conviction of the conditioned soul is the last snare of the illusory energy, which controls the entire material world.
Right. Thank you. And we see Prabhupada again. Prabhupada constantly is reminding us the difference between the soul, the individual soul, and the Supreme Godhead. Can you say something more about the false ego being represented by Lord Shiva? Vaishnavi?
The only thing that I take from this is the last snare of Maya is that we think we are God. And that is the lowest end, versus the highest end being I am Das Anudas.
Good. Can you imagine someone thinking that he's God? How is that even conceivable? It just seems like insane. We can't even understand. Here, my curtain is drawn. I don't know what's going on the other side of the curtain. How can I be? It is the last snare of Maya. I mean, give me a break. Anyone with intelligence can understand that he is not God. All right. Ian, would you like to continue on? Do you have your computer working? Your video? Video and audio. You don't have to use the video, just the audio.
Yeah, even if you don't have the video working, that's okay. You can still read.
Yeah. Ian, you have to unmute. Well, this is all mixed up. I just see the two of us on the side here. Okay. Okay, let's, Ian's not responding. So we're going to go on with Manvantara. Why don't you read?
He sent the chat. It says, I want to do so. I have to try and fix the video.
I saw that, my darling. I was just wondering if he had fixed it already. Okay, but I guess he didn't. Thank you, Elizabeth. Why don't, Manvantara, would you like to continue reading?
Sure. Thereafter, text 26 and 27. Thereafter, when his consciousness separately manifested itself, the total energy, Mahatattva, entered with his conscious part. Thus, the living entity is able to conceive specific knowledge. Thereafter, from the head of the gigantic form, the heavenly planets were manifested, and from his legs, the earthly planets, and from his abdomen, the sky separately manifested themselves. Within them, the demigods and others also were manifested in terms of the modes of material nature.
Go on reading.
The demigods, qualified by the super excellent quality of the mode of goodness, are situated in the heavenly planets, whereas the human beings, because of their nature in the mode of passion, live on the earth in company with their subordinates. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita, chapter 14, text 14 through 15, it is said that those who are highly developed in the mode of goodness are promoted to the higher heavenly planetary systems, and those who are overpowered by the mode of passion are situated in the middle planetary systems, the Earth and similar planets. But those who are surcharged with the mode of ignorance are degraded to the lower planetary systems or to the animal kingdom. The demigods are highly developed in the mode of goodness, and thus they are situated in the heavenly planets. Below human beings are the animals, although some of them mingle with human society. Cows, horses, dogs, etc., are habituated to living under the protection of human beings.
Just see how organized this is. Krishna has organized everything to fulfill all of the ridiculous desires, please forgive me, of the living entity. So that is really, he made it so perfect we can barely get out. Even we're stuck with these desires in the body of Mahavishnu. We are in a very desperate situation. It's practically speaking impossible to get out of this material world. How can we ever get out? I'm asking you, Manvantara. How can we get out? Yes, tell me the answer. How can we get out of here? What's the solution?
Krishna consciousness.
Right. Which comes from who? Okay, I see Elizabeth saying chanting. What is even before that? The most important, the only way to get out of this material world. Seisha, can you just say that one thing?
Prabhupada's mercy.
Okay, Prabhupada's mercy. Meeting a bona fide spiritual master. That's it. That is the first and foremost thing. There is a verse. I see it. See, I'm wearing my computer. It's on my wall. Pati, what's that verse? Nitya Krishna, you have to unmute.
Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema, Sajjikabunai, Shravanada Sudachite Karayat Udoy.
Right. It's coming from inside, and also meeting a bona fide spiritual master. This is a process, even though it's so packed in. We are so packed into this perfectly designed universe to satisfy these desires of the conditioned soul. We can get out, but this is the only way. Hearing from, and why hearing from a self-realized spiritual master? Because he awakens that which is already within us. Pure love for Krishna.
I want to take a minute just to expand this image because it's a really good one. I found it online. This verse and purport described how the living entities are situated in different abodes according to their activities. But when you see this bigger, you can see it more nicely with the whole universal form. You have the forehead, the neck, top of the chest, earth, waist, thighs, knees, shanks, ankles, like this. And there are 14 planetary systems. So the living entities are placed in not only in a body, but throughout the universe. They're placed in different planetary systems according to their previous activities. Their karma places them in these different places. So just wanted to point that out. Somebody did a really good job showing how the universal form and the 14 planetary systems, 7 upper planetary systems, 7 lower planetary systems are manifest in each and every universe.
Wow.
While you are in that picture, can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Regards
Vaishnavi.
so the 5th one from the top, Satyam, Tapa, Jana, Mahar, and Suvaha. Is it actually, I mean, I haven't heard that said as being Suvaha. Is it Suvaha which contains Swargaloka, or is it just a typo, Swaha?
Probably Swaha.
Okay.
Probably a typo because that's Swargaloka. It says here contains Indraloka, Swargaloka, abode of Indra and the Devas.
Okay, that's yeah. Okay, thank you.
Good, nice you caught that.
Okay. Well, thank you. Ian is not fixed yet, I guess. Okay. So, Cheta, wait a minute.
Said he was gonna restart the computer, Mataji.
Pardon?
He said he was gonna try to restart the computer.
Oh, that's good. Actually, could you read, Elizabeth? I forgot that I barely called on you. You read so nicely. Could you read?
Yes, Mataji. So, let me. Living entities who are associates of Rudra develop in the 3rd mode of material nature or ignorance. They are situated in the sky between the earthly planets and the heavenly planets. Purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. This middle portion of the sky is called Bhuvarloka, as confirmed by both Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti and Srila Jiva Goswami. In Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that those who develop in the mode of passion are situated in the middle region. Those who are situated in the mode of goodness are promoted to the regions of the demigods. Those who are situated in the mode of passion are placed in human society, and those who are situated in the mode of ignorance are placed in the society of animals and ghosts. There are no contradictions in this conclusion. Numerous living entities are distributed all over the universe in different planets and are so situated in terms of their own qualities in the modes of material nature.
Okay, you want to read the next slide too?
Okay. Bhagavatam 3:630. O chief of the Kuru dynasty, the Vedic wisdom became manifested from the mouth of Virat, the gigantic form. Those who are inclined to this Vedic knowledge are called Brahmanas, and they are the natural teachers and spiritual masters of all the orders of society. Purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 4.13, the 4 orders of human society developed with the order of the body of the gigantic form. The bodily divisions are the mouth, arms, waist, and legs. Those who are situated on the mouth are called Brahmanas. Those who are situated on the arms are called Kshatriyas. Those who are situated on the waist are called Vaishyas, and those who are situated on the legs are called Shudras. Everyone is situated in the body of the Supreme in his gigantic Vishvarupa form. Wow.
Okay. Cheta, could you read this slide? Thank you, Elizabeth.
Okay. Purport. In terms of the four orders, therefore, no caste is considered degraded because of being situated on a particular part of the body. In our own bodies, we do not show any actual difference in our treatment toward the hands or legs. Each and every part of the body is important, although the mouth is the most important of the bodily parts. If the other parts are cut off from the body, a man can continue his life. But if the mouth is cut off, one cannot live. Therefore, this most important part of the body of the Lord is called the sitting place of the Brahmanas, who are inclined to the Vedic wisdom. The main qualification of a Brahmana is to be inclined to the Vedic wisdom. The Vedas are situated on the mouth of the Lord, and therefore anyone who is inclined to the Vedic wisdom is certainly situated on the mouth of the Lord, and he is a Brahmin. This inclination towards Vedic wisdom is also not restricted to any particular caste or community. Anyone from any family and from any part of the world may become inclined to the Vedic wisdom, and that will qualify him as a real Brahmana. A real Brahmana is the natural teacher or spiritual master. Unless one has Vedic knowledge, one cannot become a spiritual master. The perfect knowledge of the Vedas is to know the Lord, the personality of Godhead, and that is the end of Vedic knowledge, or Vedanta.
Okay, read the next slide too.
Nanda had a question before we go
Oh,
on.
Nandaji.
Yeah.
Yes, I do have a question. Thank you. What's the explanation that sometimes Srila Prabhupada gives, like particularly in this purport, he said, if the mouth is cut, the mouth is the most important part of the body, and if it's cut off, one can't live. But in many other places, Srila Prabhupada says, the head is the most important part of the body. And if the head is not in proper order, one can't function properly. So how do we understand that it appears sometimes he says this analogies differently, or, is it just the simple point?
I would say that, first of all, the mouth is situated on the head, right? Without the mouth, you can't really live because you have to eat and you have to maintain your body and drink. And I can't understand anything further than that. I don't think. Pati?
Sounds like they're synonymous to me. If you cut off somebody's mouth, you've basically cut off their head.
Brilliant. Thanks. I hadn't thought of that, because I also thought, how do you cut off somebody's mouth? You know what I mean? You don't. That's it. Okay. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Some people actually, their mouths should be cut off, but anyway. Did someone else have? Go on, sweetie.
Well, from what Mother Nanda said, I was thinking, from what she said, it's not like something I read. When we cannot use the mouth, our mouth is cut off, then we cannot eat, which is needed. After some time, we will die. Whereas if we cannot use the brain properly, we can still live for 100 years, but we will not function properly, which is what Prabhupada said, because that is the word Nanda was also saying. We cannot live is different from we cannot function properly.
Right. And nowadays we can also have intravenous, and without functioning properly. What is the purpose of life? You want to live long like a tree, or you want to take advantage of your human form of life to perfect your existence? We're talking about material energy now.
Right now in this section, we're talking about the Varnashram sections of society.
Right.
And in the final one, I think Srila Prabhupada explains that without proper Brahminical guidance, human society doesn't function properly. The same way a person will not function properly if they don't have a good brain or a good mouth.
All right. We want to finish this up. How about Anita? Would you like to read the next? We finished the slide. Anita, are you there? Dr. Anita?
Yes.
Yes,
Hare
lady.
Krishna.
Hare
Yeah.
Krishna, my darling. Please read this slide.
Srimad-Bhagavatam 3.6.31. Thereafter, the power of protection was generated from the arms of the gigantic Virat form, and the relation to such power of Kshatriyas also came into existence by the following the Kshatriya principle of protecting society from the disturbance of thieves and miscreants. Purport by Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The word Purusha is significant in this verse because the Kshatriyas are expected to represent the Purusha Lord in giving protection to the prajas or all those who are born in the land and water. Protection is therefore meant for both man and the animals. In modern society, the prajas are not protected from the hands of thieves and miscreants. The modern democratic state, which has no Kshatriyas, is a government of the Vaishyas and Shudras, and not of Brahmanas and Kshatriyas as formerly.
Right. That's pretty clear, right?
Yeah.
Very clear. Oh, Ian, are you here? All right, he's not here. Go on reading.
Yes, I am.
Oh, Ian's here. Better late than never. Nice to hear your voice. Why don't you read for us? Thank you, Anita. Thank you.
Where should I begin?
This slide 3632.
Let me see. Okay, so what the means of livelihood? That's the one?
Yes.
Okay, so means of livelihood of all persons, namely production of grains and their distribution to produce, were generated from the thighs of the Lord's gigantic form. Mercantile men who take a charge of such execution are called viceroys. Purport. Human society's means of living is clearly mentioned here as viceroy, vija, or agriculture and the business of distributing agricultural products, which involves transport, banking, etc. Industry is an artificial means of livelihood, and large-scale industry especially is the source of all the problems of society. In Bhagavad Gita, also the duties of the Vaishyas who are engaging in vija are stated as co-protection, agriculture, and business. We have already discussed that the human being can safely depend on the cow and agricultural land for his livelihood.
Go on. Read the next one.
Okay, purport continue. It is clearly said here that the principle of service was generated from legs of the Lord for the sake of perfecting the religious process. But this transcendental service is different from the idea of service in the material world. The material world.
Wait a minute. Seems to be some confusion here. Are you on the right slide, Ian?
He's reading from the book, not from the slides.
Oh, read 3:633. The verse.
Okay, I didn't. Okay. Okay.
But that's better that you read from the book if you can't get it on the screen.
I have it on screen.
Oh, read it from the screen then.
Okay.
Because sometimes
this was manifested from the legs of the personality of Godhead for the sake of perfecting the religious function. Seated on the legs are the Sudras who satisfy the Lord by service. Purport. It is clearly said here that the principle of service was generated from the legs of the Lord for the sake of perfecting the religious process. But this transcendental service is different from the idea of service in the material world. In the material world, no one wants to be a servant. Everyone wants to become the master because false mastership is the basic disease of the conditioned soul. The conditioned soul in the material world wants to lord it over others. Illusion by the external energy of the Lord is forced to become a servant of the material world. That is the real position of the conditioned soul.
Okay. Thank you, Ian. Do you have something to say about this? Is it clear? This is
Yes.
where devotional service begins.
Yes, it is clear in the sense that we came here because we wanted Lord over material nature and didn't want to serve the Supreme Lord as is done in the spiritual world. So we are put here, and when we come here, we want to Lord it rather than be servants. We want to be lords. So that is part of our conditions.
Yeah, but we're given an opportunity, the basic foundation, the lotus feet of the Lord, represented by service.
Yes.
So if we serve the Lord, then we can go back to our constitutional position.
Yes.
Thank you, Ian.
Yes, I just turned out servant. Sorry for the ups and downs.
Oh,
Technology.
okay, you were missed. I'm always searching for you here. Okay, next time you try to get on earlier. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, the next slide, Faye, would you read it?
Yes, Mataji. Srimad-Bhagavatam 3.6.34. All these different social divisions are born with their occupational duties and living conditions from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, for unconditional life and self-realization, one has to worship the Supreme Lord under the direction of the spiritual master. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Since they are born from different parts of the body of the Supreme Lord in his gigantic form, all living entities in all parts of the entire universe are supposed to be eternal servitors of the Supreme Body. Every part of our own body, such as the mouth, hands, thighs, and legs, is meant to render service to the whole. That is their constitutional position. In subhuman life, the living entities are not conscious of this constitutional position, but in the human form of life, they are supposed to know this through the system of the Varnas or the social orders.
Go on, Faye.
Purport continued. The actual position of the conditioned soul is explained in this verse. All the conditioned souls are impure due to contact with the material energy in the three modes of nature. Therefore, it is necessary that they purify themselves under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, who not only is a Brahmana by qualification, but must also be Vaishnava. The only self-purifying process mentioned herein is to worship the Lord under the recognized method, under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master. That is a natural way of purification, and no other method is recommended as bona fide. Other methods of purification may be helpful to come to this stage of life, but ultimately one has to come to this last point before he attains actual perfection.
Unmute, Sam. Unmute.
It's amazing how Prabhupada has made full circle, completely full circle of everything. It's just so we can have a little bit of extended discussion now. If anybody has a question or wants to make a statement about this marvelous universal form that we're learning all about. Chaitanya, you have something to say?
I do, if you're willing to listen. First of all, I want to thank Dhruva Maharaj for putting up all these pictures and charts, and all of them are superlative and really helpful to my slow mind. It's nice to have an image to meditate on. So thank you for doing that.
Okay.
I don't know if this is, anyway, it just occurred to me in verse 11, it describes that when the living entities, when their desire to lord it over material nature has vanished, they are promoted to the post of demigods. So is this, is there a standard procedure, or is it really, it's up to Krishna for each individual where they're headed to in their next incarnation?
But do you want to answer that? You're shaking your head.
Well, I'm just agreeing that it is Krishna placing each person into their particular post. Everything is extremely precise in the Lord's placing people where they're supposed to be for their particular sojourn in this world.
In addition to that, from our side, it depends upon our desire and our work. We heard about all of that in the first place, how due to our desires, which transfer over to the next complete creation, they don't go away, these desires, they just become transformed. So it's not only it's Krishna, but he allows the living entity to fulfill those desires. So
these desires get us into so much trouble.
There's so much trouble.
Does
or
it
out of
us?
So much. Yeah.
Does it make sense to really pinpoint and identify those desires, and then we can see them for what they are, as being a source of trouble? Or do we take them and then Krishna-ize them and see how we can serve with these?
I don't know. But who has an answer to that one?
Akama sarvakamo va
moksha karma
vrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param.
Nice verse. Thank you.
So you want to say that in English so others can understand it too?
Whether one is without desire, akama, filled with desire, sarvakama, or even wants liberation, moksha kama, akama sarvakamo va, moksha kama without a D. Tivrena bhakti yogena, one should engage sincerely and intensely, tivrena, in service to the Lord, bhakti yogena, yajeta purusham param, to the supreme original person. It doesn't matter if one has desires. We don't need to get into all the different analyzation of them and psychotherapy about them and everything. Simply try to serve Krishna, and he'll appreciate that service and purify the living entity who does so.
Beautiful.
Before we end today was lesson 8 that we went up to, but because of the way the month goes this particular week, next week will be the end of January, but it's still on Monday or before the end of the week. So we're going to have a lesson 9, and then we'll switch to February, which will be lesson 1 in February. So next week's Zoom will include 9 from January and 1 from February. And I want to remind everyone that the way our software works is that each month is individual course. So if you want to continue studying with us, then you must sign up for the February month and that course in order to receive all the notices and emails and go on and look at the texts and purports, course materials. So make sure you do that for February before February arrives.
Okay. Manvantara had a question.
Manvantara.
Thank you, Bhajan. I appreciate that. I wanted to just point out on text 13, it said Varuna in my reading, but then the Varuna of air in my reading, but on the screen it was different.
Varuna,
director of water, but here it says the director of air. You know,
probably an editing adjustment.
Okay, because
Varuna is the director of water.
Right.
So the whatever version you have, I don't know whether it's the earlier one or the later one. It's just simply an editing change.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. Good that you noticed that.
Okay.
Anyone else have something to say before we close up?
So we have to register for February?
Yes,
before
yes, Sasha.
February? Before
Yes.
February?
Anytime. I've made it available now. You just click on the February title when you go to the home page and you see the list, January, February, March, April for the third canto. Click on February and there'll be a little box that says enroll me. Just click that box and you'll be enrolled.
So that's because of just technology. Just it's the system how this course is
Software
made
works.
available.
Yeah.
So, that's why it's important from your side to register. Okay? Did someone else, Tisha, did you have something to say? No? Thank you. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
See you
Thank you.
next time.
Vancha
Please
kalpa
accept my
durga
obeisances.
cha.
Vancha kalpa
Kripa
durga
sindhu
cha.
durga.
Titanam bhavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo.
Namo namaha.
Thank you for making this a true sadhu sangha. Hare Krishna.